Penn State's biggest threat in their recruit for this five-star prospect is Washington?
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into a Locked On Crossover. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Roman Tomashoff of Locked On Huskies. Penn State, Washington crossover here as well. Paths cross with the fact that they are recruiting not just a five-star player, but another talented running back in this conversation as well. So we're going to hit on a bunch of emphasis with recruiting here as well. They're both in the Big Ten Conference, even though one's on one side of the country and one's on the other side of the country. This is the new game in college football when it comes to recruiting. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen and watch every single day. Roman, let's talk about Brandon Arrington. Washington was not involved in this recruitment early on. Penn State was. Penn State got his first official visit of this cycle, went very well. Things seemed like Penn State had a stronger case than maybe first anticipated. But now as time goes on, Washington puts itself into the conversation. What is the latest there that the Huskies could surprise Texas A&M, Oregon, and Penn State for five-star athlete, cornerback, wide receiver Brandon Arrington?
Well, Zach, first of all, he surprised me because I got a text from a buddy of mine on Wednesday night and said, "Hey, have you seen this?" And I looked down at my phone and it says like Brandon Arrington Twitter. And I was like, "Oh, let's open this. Let's see what this is." And it's, wait, he's coming to visit on Friday. So that in itself was shocking because this really was a surprise to everybody in the Washington community with how late Washington seemed to get in this process. And you go and you read some of these trip reports and it's, yeah, Washington just absolutely blew him away with his visit. You go and you look at everything he's posting about it on Twitter. It's, hey, don't sleep on Washington in my recruiting process. And I can't help but agree where I still feel that it is a very much so an uphill battle for the Huskies to end up with his commitment, but they've given him a lot to think about. And it's not just where, you go and you look at it, and Washington has done really well for themselves in this recruiting cycle. You flip a five-star tackle away from Oregon and Cody Green. You get the number one player in the state in Derek Coleman-Brusa, a big-time edge rusher who was down to UW, Oregon, and Ohio State. So he had some big-time just offers coming after him as well in terms of, everything that comes into just recruiting nowadays, right? But I look at Brandon Arrington, and it's not even just all of that, all of the resources that Washington is able to offer that they've been selling to all these recruits. It's what he's going to be able to do on the field, because he did an interview with On3's Chad Simmons a couple of weeks ago, and he said, whoever recruits me the hardest, proves that they can develop me, and shows that they can get me on the field early is who's going to ultimately win the day. And that's where I think Washington has really put themselves in the mix very heavily, because your top two corners are leaving after this year, and Takario Davis and Ephesians Prysock. And I fully expect Leroy Bryant and Dylan Robinson to be Washington starters next year. But outside of Bryant, who's going to be going into his junior season, every single corner on that roster will be listed as a sophomore or younger. There'll be a couple of redshirt freshmen, a couple of true freshmen. So there's going to be a lot of youth. And if Arrington, with his just absolutely otherworldly track speed, can come in and prove that he can learn the defense quickly and adapt to the speed and the physicality of the college game quickly, there's no reason he couldn't get on the field early at Washington.
I think the same goes for Penn State too. I mean, he's a consensus five-star. He's per the industry rankings where you combine all of them, On3, 24/7, ESPN, Rivals. He is a top 10 player, top 10 overall in the nation. You can't go wrong with playing him at cornerback. Now, I know he's being primarily recruited as a cornerback, but that's where Penn State's recruitment gets interesting, because they're kind of looking for that two-way athlete that can play both sides of the football. And I got to imagine you had that conversation with Arrington that, hey, we'll recruit you as a cornerback, but you could also play wide receiver too. So he's effective wherever you put him. There is no wrong answer. Penn State obviously needs help at wide receiver with what we've seen in terms of overall production. I think this group is good, and this group is a step in the right direction for once. But for the future at wide receiver, you can't go wrong with Arrington in Penn State's case. The cornerback, Penn State's done a very good job recruiting and developing just defensive backs overall, whether it's true corners, true safeties. Arrington has a lot to like about Penn State, but geographically speaking, he's from California. And that's where Washington does not I don't like that Washington gets in this recruiting battle, if I'm being honest. I think that what it does, Oregon shouldn't, Texas A&M shouldn't either. They're kind of the prohibitive favorites, if you will. But in Penn State's case, who is trying to play spoiler in this recruitment, Washington getting involved here does not help the Nittany Lions.
I think that's a really fair point. Washington traditionally has done very well in California, and getting he's from up here originally. I talked about Cody Green a few minutes ago, the 5-star offensive tackle. He plays down at Mater Dei in Southern California, one of the powerhouses just in this country. Yeah. When we talk about high school football. So they already have a top 5 player from California in terms of the rankings again in this class, and being able to close on the number 1 player in California would just really do wonders for what Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff is trying to do and just lock down the West Coast. And Zach, I'm really glad you talk about a two-way player, because that's something Washington has proven that they're very interested in doing in the cycle, because I think you could do that with Arrington if you really wanted to, because one of the other top 50 prospects in this class is 4-star athlete Celesi Moa, who was also on campus last week here at Washington. And he's somebody who looks like he could end up at safety, could end up at wide receiver. And we look at some of the other schools that are in this recruitment. It sounds like Utah might be the favorite there, but Michigan, Michigan State, and Tennessee, it all feels like they've gotten this far by pitching him as a two-way player. And it feels like you could absolutely say the same about Brandon Arrington, because that elite speed, you want to make sure you can use that however you can. And if he's willing to play both, maybe even, I really do believe that some schools are also pitching him as a two-sport athlete. And Washington's done a really good job developing track athletes in recent years, where they had a run of 5, and no pun intended there, of 5 straight national champions in the mile. So Washington's done a really good job developing players on the track as well. So if he wants to come in and run track and run the 100 and run the 200, where he broke Noah Lyles' record down in California, an Olympic gold medalist, it's absolutely wild. And I think that that's something that could end up being really appealing to him at the end of the day.
Oregon has the final visit, so they kind of have the leverage here. USC is just getting too crowded. That's why his top 6, now adding Washington, Penn State 2, but Oregon, Texas A&M, Alabama, USC. Oregon's probably banking on the fact that, hey, we have the final visit, so we get the final say here. But I think Washington's chipped away at this, and in the process, they also chip at whatever lead that Penn State thought it had, or how strong their message was of being in the mix and surprising the likes, because everything pointed to Texas A&M, but Oregon was always still there. And then, hey, Penn State makes that really strong first impression. Now time has gone on, and then, Washington pops up. That's it. It doesn't bode well for the Nittany Lions. Roman, it's more likely that you and I are in a similar category at the end of this, where neither of the schools that we cover end up getting Brandon Arrington. But if it is Washington, that starts to cement them as a legitimate threat within the Big Ten, because I think of Oregon first and foremost. USC, it's obviously Ohio State and everybody's playing catch up. But as far as the newcomers go, this is how you make a splash if you're Washington, and other schools should take notice if the Huskies actually pull this off with Jedd Fisch.
Absolutely. And that's what Washington has been trying to do. We saw them try to go out and do that last year, where they looked at Andrew Marsh and Donovan Olubide, a pair of top 100 overall players in the 25 class, and tried to flip them away from Michigan and Missouri, where they ended up signing respectively. But it didn't work out. Now you go out and you make that big time flip in 2026, and that was just a matter of adding around them. Another guy they had on campus this past weekend was 4-star wide receiver Vance Spafford, who's a top 100 player in the class, who's committed to Georgia right now. Washington is taking bigger swings, and it's really starting to pay off, because, like Zach, as somebody on the East Coast, you have traditionally thought of Oregon and USC because those are the big brand powers. But Washington has done a really good job reminding people, hey, only one school from the Pac-12 made it to the college football playoff twice in the 4-team era. That's Washington. And with Jedd Fisch and what he's been able to do on the recruiting trail, I really like where this class is going.
Well, on the recruiting trail, that's not the only battle that Penn State and Washington are in the thick of. Top 10 running back, Brian Bonner, somebody that has both Penn State and Washington in his top 5. And for both schools, this is a need when it comes to a commitment. And we'll explain why coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover. And this crossover episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it is easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Now, Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, spending, all in one place. So you stop just managing your money, you start building wealth. You'll get surprising insights. When I started using Monarch Money, I just realized how much I was spending on different things like groceries or dining out, package deliveries. Now I get to budget smarter and save more. And you'll get all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. And you'll get easy collaboration moving forward. Managing money with your partner, it's smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's right, 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year.
So, Zach, when we look at four-star running back Brian Bonner, he's somebody who I've been really, really high on in this class for a very long time. I've been so impressed with what he is, where I think he's got the physicality, the skill set, the long speed. I believe it's somewhere in the 10.5s that he was running on the track in the 100-meter dash to be a bell cow running back very early on in his college career if he goes the right system. Now, he's scheduled to visit Penn State on June 6th. He visited Washington back at the end of April on the 25th, I believe the date was. And I'm really curious to see how this recruitment is going to shape up because honestly, at this moment, I don't believe either of our schools are in the lead.
Yeah, UCLA, I mean, he's another player from California that we're talking about here. So when it comes to proximity, that's where the worry is with Washington. I think there's more of a need as well. Now, granted, Penn State is losing two co-starters with Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen at running back. But something that I was so sure of, and this is why Penn State might even make a stronger push for the likes of a Brian Bonner, because he is a top 10 running back. Penn State is quietly a contender for running back you, at least recently, right? It was Saquon Barkley starting this trend, and now you could potentially send off a day one and a day two running back going into next year's NFL draft. They were ranked 5th and 6th if they had entered in the 2025 cycle. Regardless, though, it's about what they have presently in the class of 2026. And Messiah Mickens, who is a top 10 running back in his own right, and Penn State tries to get at least two in every single cycle, there's this small chance that they might not even get Mickens at this point. So now your attention pivots. And this was something that I was confident in that, hey, he's a Pennsylvania player. He's been committed to Penn State for a long time. Like he was the first recruit to commit in the class of 2026 to Penn State. And there's a chance that J1 Sider and Notre Dame could flip him. How big that chance is, I couldn't tell you. But there is a chance. Even if it is minimal, he's taking that official visit to Notre Dame. If Penn State even senses that there is a possibility that you're going to lose your lone running back commit, you cannot afford to take zero in this class when you are losing not one, but two co-starters. Brian Bonner becomes an absolute priority here. He's scheduled to visit Penn State on June 13th. So going up against Washington, Notre Dame as well is in his top 5, even though they already have 2 running back commits. But again, that's not scaring away Messiah Mickens in this recruiting process. He's going to take the visit. So Penn State's got to put its attention towards Brian Bonner. I would say that getting a 5-star player above all else is going to be significant. But with what Penn State needs, and he's a top 10 running back, you have to get this player with or without Messiah Mickens in this class of 2026 if you're Penn State.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel a similar way about Brian Bonner, where Washington's one running back commit right now is a 3-star Ansu Sanoe. At the time of his commitment, he was a top 100 player in this cycle. And he's kind of just slowly dropped down rankings. But this is a guy who had offers from Oregon, and Georgia was in the mix for him before he ended up committing to Washington. He committed very early in the process. And he's exactly what running backs coach Scotty Graham looks for in one of the 2 prototypes that he likes to take every year. He likes to take a track guy, which is what Brian Bonner certainly can be, with his elite long speed, like I was talking about a minute ago. And he also looks for a big physical between the tackles runner, which at 6'2", 210, 215 is exactly what Ansu Sanoe is. And one of the things I'm really interested in with the recruitment of Brian Bonner is Washington had him up on his official visit super early, like I mentioned. Mm-hmm. And since this UCLA visit, it's kind of felt like the tide is turning, where I look at that UCLA roster, and something I mentioned over on Locked On Huskies is UCLA's running back group is not great. They've got a couple of transfers who are both out of eligibility after this season. You've got a redshirt freshman, I believe, is going to be his eligibility status this year. I could be wrong on that, in Carson Cox. So he's the only guy right now that when I was looking at their depth chart, that has eligibility remaining after this season. So you certainly can sell Brian Bonner on taking a lion's share of the carries as a true freshman if you really do believe in him. And also, it doesn't hurt that their head coach, Deshaun Foster, is a former running back. Yes. And that's something that you certainly are going to be able to sell to some of these recruits on the trail. And when I look at Washington, I kind of see them starting to pivot in a sense to three-star athlete Dre Pollard, who's on his official visit this last weekend to Washington. He's from Ed W. Clark High School in Las Vegas. And one of his teammates, three-star offensive tackle Dominic Harris, and another Las Vegas kid, four-star safety Gavin Day, both have already announced their commitments to Washington after taking that visit with him. So sensing that with the crystal ball, I feel like Washington might end up taking him. And while I originally thought he might end up playing defensive back, I have a feeling that he might end up at running back if things go the way that they just currently feel like they're trending in this recruitment.
Roman, let's finish up this conversation with this and the fact of, who do you think is the more likely landing spot for Bonner? I would say that Penn State, from our perspective, I would think Penn State has a better chance than Washington, actually. Penn State has the final official visit. There's a chance that, again, Penn State's going to, put more emphasis on landing Bonner in this class of 2026. But Washington can offer that same thing. Hey, you're closer to home. There's more of a chance. I mean, Penn State's the depth chart is pretty crowded, but that doesn't mean anything from the fact there's going to be a battle for both running back 1 and running back 2. That's the way that Penn State operates, is that you have 2 starting running backs. So do you want to be in that battle or go to UCLA? It's in your backyard. On3 has it listed as 35 miles away. But in this conversation, who do you think is the favorite between Penn State and UW? I got to say it's the Nittany Lions here.
So I got to disagree with you there, Zach. I've got to go with Washington. And one of the big reasons there is I've been so impressed with Scotty Graham and his ability to build relationships on the recruiting trail. He has done a really great job of that for a long time. He's already been down to Valencia High School in Southern California twice in the most recent contact period to take in-school visits with Brian Bonner. And I really like that relationship that he's been able to build up with him. And it's something where, to get to this point in the process with Washington, where the one other depth chart thing I want to mention here before we get out of here is I look at what Washington is going to be like in 2026. And I think that you already have 2 bona fide, I don't want to say co-starters, but a bona fide order, with Adam Muhammad expected to be a junior and take the lion's share of the carries in that regard, and then have Jordan Washington, a former 4-star recruit in the 2024 class, with truly elite long speed with 10.2 and 100-meter dash to back him up. So with those 2 guys, and the fact that Washington has already gotten to this point in the recruiting process with him, where he is certainly going to be looking for that early playing time, I think that's what might end up winning the day for him in the long run. And Zach, with that being said, thank you so much for doing this. You and I, we love getting together and doing some of these crossovers, as everydayers on both of our channels know, and just let everybody out there know where they can find all your content.
I mean, yeah, we're the daily sources for Penn State and Washington, respectively. I got you covered for football, basketball, wrestling, you name it. It's same thing on your end. And I think we're going to have more of these conversations, as they're both, even though we're so far away from each other geographically, the Big Ten Conference and conference realignment changes everything. So, Roman, thank you for the time. Thank you to all the listeners and viewers out there for checking out this Locked On crossover. Subscribe to both our channels and wherever you get your podcast for the latest around Penn State and Washington here on the Locked On Podcast Network.